Hello everyone, my name is Jeremy Elder. I am a staff product designer on the Foundations team at GitLab, and I wanted to walk through the release notes for the Figma UI Kit for milestone 1511 that just finished up. So this release notes covers all the changes in that, and that was published earlier today, Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. So I'll just jump right in, and my goal here is just to walk through any of these changes, enhancements, additions, fixes, etc., highlight what they are, and we'll go from there. Hopefully in the future we'll be publishing this in a section on Pajamas on the website itself. There's an MR in flight right now, which would add a section under Getting Started. We would have the Figma UI Kit and then release notes, and so hopefully this is where we publish those in the future. At the moment, I am working through the Word doc. So let's jump in, get started. All right, first up, additions. Link components are now available for all link categories. So before, we were just managing this through solely through styles or through kind of a default beta link in one instance. And so now all of these are available. So when I say link components for all link categories, we go back over to Pajamas, we go to components, link. We have our 4 categories: inline text, user interface, meta, and mention. So all of those now have related components. So if I'm in Figma here, here's my test file, search for link. See, I have inline text, meta UI, and then mention. So those are all available. If you are in there, let's close this up. You should be able to also see the descriptions for these. There we go. Those descriptions also match what is in Pajamas. So those have been added. So make use of those, read through that. If you need any help, let a Foundations designer know. Let's see here. Also, I should note that a future update will add instructions for adding style overrides for inline use. So within Figma, if you were to just have a paragraph of text, you know, inserting one of these components in the midst of that paragraph is kind of cumbersome. So we'll have the styles that help highlight that. All right, next up, added the cloud terminal icon. This represents workspace. You can see it in here. And then the description of that also indicates that it's for workspace. This is available in the SVG's project as well. All right, next, added all of these in illustrations. So thank you, Julia, for working on this, and Justin. Some awesome movement on illustrations, and look for even more coming up. I won't go through each one of these, but they're all empty states. So please check that out. Take a look at those. Look at the styles. They're also available in Figma. In fact, I'll just go ahead and open up the product illustrations file here. Products. And so most of these at the end and below are new. There's also a few base components that have been added for label, scissors. So some of these reusable elements have also been added. All right, on to enhancements. So a breaking change with a medium impact is to the sidebar. If you're using sidebar with type admin, it now includes CI/CD as an item, and it matches production. And then there's also some color matching. Looks like I've got some in-air characters there. And so just a note, when you update this, this change might reattach some components that were detached, and badges might change appearance. Just to use that component, I'll show you quick here. Sidebar. Inserted that. We're going to go to admin. So here's CI/CD. Here's some of the badges. So just keep an eye out for that if you're using that. All right, next up, Another breaking change, medium impact, this time to the tooltip. This now resizes based on the content. One of the caveats with this is that Figma doesn't support maximum width just yet, or minimum width. So we've decided to change the component, instead of manually resizing, to be based on the content. However, you'll have to pay attention to max width. So insert the tooltip. All right, so I have a tooltip here, and I'm just gonna add some longer content to test width. Now you won't see any alerts, warnings telling you that this is wider than it needs to be. The width, max width, is 200 pixels. You can see right now we're at 261. So what we've done as a kind of an interim way to detect this without having max width and without adding extra layers, etc., would simply just be to use the layout grids. So if I just do, where did that go? There we go. All right. So if I do Shift G, which turns the layout grids on or off, or you can also go up to View and Layout Grids, you'll notice these red lines. Now this marks the edge of the max width. So with the grid turned on, what I can do is simply come in and hit a return. You notice that I'm still, well beyond that. So now when I remove that character, just because of where the grids display for Figma, you might see one of them, but if you only see this one here on the left, you should be correct. We're right at 200. So if this were where both of them were appearing, you know that you're over. If it's less than, you're under. So this is just a way to kind of manually test that width and check that out. So I'll turn that off. I should say, if previous behavior, you would be able to resize. You can no longer do that. You can do that to this outer, but because of the way the content wraps and is controlled on the inside, you will not have a response. So again, resize that with the content, turn on the grid to test to make sure you're under that 200 pixel max width. All right, added a gray variant for the sticky utility component. So the reason for this is just to match the to-dos that are in Pajamas. So if I'm in utilities, just added this gray one here. It's actually in use. Let's see, where do we put that in use at? I think in links. Oh yes, so got a little to-do here in links that we've included that. So that is available, also using the same empty document icon. All right, next up, we've started improving component pages, and we've done this by including headings and descriptions. So I'll jump to a few examples. Typography is a good one of this, where there's a heading, there's a description of what you're seeing, and then the content. So typography, you can see this when you zoom out. It's an easier way to see some of that hierarchy, but also to have better groupings and better descriptions. You'll notice that this is using a frame. This is using a section, which is relatively new to Figma. The reason we're using a section here is so that we can also have components within. If we were to use a parent frame, the parent frame impacts component naming, which we did not want to do. So we are using a section to contain both components and other documentation, instances, etc. Let's see, another example where this is being used currently is the link page. And with links, again, documentation, and then here's a section that also includes some info and content, a component. The text description that's visible here should be very similar, if not identical, to what is present in the component description. And the reason for that is just to make it more visible, rather than relying on a tooltip in the assets panel to view that information. Let's see where the link's at. So this allows it to appear here. There is a little bit of redundancy and there's manual work involved in that, but we feel like it's a better experience, and it makes this file more scannable and a little more meaningful to to pick that out. So that is an enhancement. Hope that works for you. Please comment and provide feedback. Changes. All right, so buttons. Buttons have been renamed now to have a button default or a button / prefix. And doing so, the reason for that is just to make it easier to identify when a button is a button. And we'll be looking at other components doing this as well. So, for example, there's a link variant of a button. There's also default, but there's default of others. There's also link component. And so in doing this, it's hopefully making it easier to determine what is a button and what isn't, as well as other components. So, example, if I go in here, I search for a button. Now, well, here's another good example, radio button. But I'm also seeing that there is the button confirm, button default. If I just searched for default, you see, well, there's a default cursor, there's a default tab, there's other default items, but okay, here we get into button. I think button default is actually down here. So we'll know that it's a default, and that makes it a little easier. So this list here is just highlighting the naming updates and the button / prefix. One more thing to just take care of when you're choosing between a link and a button. Links generally go and buttons generally do, so just something to keep in mind. The links here go to the Pajamas documentation, where you can learn more about when and when not to use either. All right, next up, inline highlight component is now link mention. So the existing styles, not Figma styles, but just the design that was there before, it's been expanded, has interactive styles and inline and meta variants. So if I go to link mention, here we go. That's what this looks like here with username. And so now we also have the states that go with that. Prior to this, it was just available as part of like a typography text component. And now it is fully related to the link, which it is, and has its own styles and states. Breaking change, that's low impact, but the addition and removal content styles have been moved to a new inline highlight component. So under typography, here we find it, inline highlights. So this is when there are additions or subtractions that highlight content, highlight text within. These are now a component, and so instead of just having inline styles that would achieve that, it's now been componentized. So low impact, shouldn't really see anything change, but just check, make sure you don't lose overrides if you update to that at all. All right, so next up, icons page, pointing to the GitLab product icons. In the previous version of the component library, there was a page under foundations that linked, well, it didn't link, it was just a placeholder page that had previously housed all of the icons, the GitLab product icons. And for, I think, well over a year now, if not 2 years, there's just been a placeholder that linked to this separate product icons file with a note that had been pulled out of the main UI kit or component library file here and placed in its own. So that page has been removed. So that's just a heads up. No change needed on your end. All right, next up on changes, breaking change, it's medium impact, and that's to dropdowns. We have reduced the size of the dropdown by 8 pixels, so relatively minor, and this is the default size, the minimum width, if you will. And we've reduced that width on all of the instances, all the examples here. The reason for this is to better support some navigation updates that are happening, so that the drop-down in its default state fits within that navigation sidebar. So that has been carried through here. It's the medium impact here is just to note that if you use the drop-down, it's going to shrink in size, which may have a change in your layout, in text wrapping. It can also, there's also some other improvements and enhancements that shouldn't impact you, but just better changes to responsive behavior for elements within. So the scrim, for example, here the shadow wasn't resizing correctly before, and now it is, along with a few other things. And then the last thing to note that would be considered part of a breaking change is the tip. The left and right options, so not center and not dynamic, those were using constraints for center. And so what would happen would be is if you resized the dropdown, what was set to left would slowly move and adjust at the same time. With this update, left means left, and it's in this fixed position. So you might notice that that shifts for you. If you need a dynamic positioning, look to use the dynamic option. All right, last change, which is a high impact if you're using Breadcrumbs. So Breadcrumbs now use the meta link style. So if I go in here, it's actually using a meta link component. And yes, a breadcrumb is a link, but it's more navigational. It's a little different than a meta link per se. However, the concept is abstracted out into a meta link currently, and something along those lines might also happen with design tokens in the future. So it is using that, and so you just be aware of that. Also, the current page item is using the bold meta link style, so it's extended to that. So those would be breaking changes, and the breadcrumb is still deprecated. It's available down here. The old version is still available for use. It's just has the deprecated text appended to it. We'll look to release or to remove that in a future milestone, but you will be notified in release notes when that's going to happen or has happened. So if you're able to update now, that would be great. Give you some time before that goes away altogether. And then last but not least, a fix just to the button link component. Those text overrides now persist when changing states. So if I was, let's go ahead and just insert here. Link, it's fine. Button link. Now if I go ahead and let's change the text here. Testing override. Go ahead and change our state, and our text changes persist. So make that a little easier to see. All right, that is all. I hope that this has been helpful. Again, we aim to do this for every release, to walk through, demonstrate the changes, highlight what you might be needing to watch out for, what's changed, what's forthcoming, to make all of the design updates a little more expected, predictable, and manageable, so that anything with breaking changes is less scary, but also highlight why we're making these changes in the first place. So please, if you would, provide feedback in Slack or along with this video. I'd love to know what has been helpful, what you would like to see more of as we do this in the future. And also hope to make this less of a monologue and a little more conversational when we do future updates. But stay tuned. We're going to continue to iterate on this process and work through it. So thank you for watching.